You know how I say things, and those of you who have been watching my videos and following me on Twitter for years, I say things, I predict things, I have hunches about things, I know things, and I go on and on about it, and no one believes me. But Mick, what do you know? You don't get a lot of subs or follows, or, nobody responds to what you say, nobody cares. By the way, over on X, I'm followed by people like John Boyega. Yeah, baby. So, yeah, and I'm not having free-flowing convos with John, but it shows you that people are listening. I don't need people to respond to what I'm saying. I don't need people to like and retweet what I say, or share these days or whatever. I don't need 1,000 comments on my YouTube videos. I say things because I want to say them, because they're in my heart and soul, because I'm passionate about entertainment and stories. That's why I talk. I don't need anyone's attention. If nobody ever watches my video, if nobody ever sees a post I make on Twitter or the new account, the new social media platform, what's it called? Blue Sky, yeah, whatever, I don't care. I'm on social media just to say my bit, shrug my shoulders, go on my balcony, have some coffees, teas, whatever, smoke a few cigarettes, yeah, I smoke, whatever, and enjoy life. I'm not here for attention. I'm not here to make money. But isn't it interesting? For years and years and years, I've been saying this, that Our Miles and the CW didn't like each other. That the CW hated Smallville. I did a video about Smallville the other day, and I was saying this very thing, and people were saying, you don't know, Mick, why would the CW hate Smallville? They kept on renewing, blah, blah, blah. What happens? The Shoe podcast, now Shoe are a group of Smallville fans. They do one about Smallville, Superman and Lois, blah, blah. Like, they're big Superman fans. They're great guys. They're brilliant. And they've been going since Smallville was airing. And so I noticed this video on X Twitter where they had Our Miles. Alfred Miles, let me say that again. Alfred Goff and Miles Miller are the creators of Smallville, and they run the show for 7 years. They wrote a lot of the episodes and sat in the writer's room for the first 3 seasons. The final episode they ever wrote was the season premiere of season 4 of the full series. Smallville went for a decade, don't forget. So they were talking about how the quality went down, and the quality went down on purpose because the CW hated the show. Now, what's interesting is they had a great relationship when it was broadcast on the WB, but then Warner Brothers and CBS TV merged to create the CW. And the CW didn't want Smallville as part of its future plans. It wasn't the type of show they wanted. But the CW had a bit of a problem. Smallville was propping this struggling network up. Now, the WB wasn't a struggling network. I don't know what happened. I don't know why they decided to merge it. Maybe they felt it was the way forward. It was a huge mistake. So the CW and their then kind of leader, Dawn Osloff, hated Smallville and really wanted to tank the show. But as Our Miles said on this Shoe podcast, the fans kept on coming back. The fans supported the show. The actors, the cast, the crew were absolutely fantastic, keeping this show going. Smallville had 3 fabulous seasons. The quality did go down from the moment Our Miles were no longer writing episodes, and you can tell that. But I will defend Smallville season 4, 5, 6, 7, even 8, 9 and 10, even though after Our Miles left the show, which was at the end of season 7, you could tell the mentality had changed and the CW were finally getting their way. When Our Miles left, they took Michael Rosenbaum, who played Lex Luthor, with them. John Glover, who played Lionel Luthor, with them. Christine Crook, who played Lorna Lang, with them. They didn't say, come on, you're coming with us. They left. They showed solidarity with Our Miles, and it was time for them to go. They felt like their Smallville run was gone. Michael Rosenbaum would have stayed if he was offered more money. What happened? He left. They're so dumb. By him leaving, they lost ratings. They lost ad ad revenue, sponsorship revenue. They're so dumb. They didn't want to pay him the money he deserved, but they lost money anyway. So as soon as Alan Miles and these cast members left, right, the show lost its ratings and its popularity, and it was put on the death spot, the graveyard slot of Friday night. Smallville broke Friday night records because it was still popular enough to be very popular on a Friday, but it wasn't popular enough. It lost the ratings because they used to be on, I think, Thursday nights at 8, which was a peak period. The Vampire Diaries, in comes the Vampire Diaries and takes that slot. On today's video, because these revelations have come out, how the CW hated Smallville and wanted to tank it, I'm asking the question, how would have Smallville have ended if Alan Miles remained running the show? If it remained the WB instead of merging into the CW, there's no question, Alan Miles would have stayed. There is no question about that. They would have taken less of a little bit of a backseat like they did from the beginning of season 4 onwards, but they would have been the official showrunners. And there's no question, if Alan Miles remained as executive producers of that show, and let's not forget from season 8 onwards, the only credit Goff and Miller, the creators and former showrunners and producers of the show, had was show developed by Alfred Goff and Miles Miller. That was their only credit. No executive producers. Even Eric Kripke, after he moved on from, being hands-on of Supernatural, still had a credit, a production credit in it, whatever credit he had. But they were driven off the show. And I mentioned this on my other video that Alan Miles also took the CW and Warner Brothers to court. And it was to do with all the little issues that they had. Now, I think there's elements of the Smallville series finale, we discussed this the other day, that I didn't like, and there's elements that I think are okay. But ultimately, the show didn't end the way I wanted it to, and I thought the finale and a lot of the final season was a bit of a mess, as was a lot of the final 3 seasons, although there's some really good stuff. I think the final 3 seasons, I wouldn't say they're great seasons, but there's good stuff. There's good stuff in those final 3 seasons, like Absolute Justice, like Legion, like Bride, like some of the Zod episodes, in season 9. I still think Sam Witwer should have played Zod. I think that was a big mistake, and that was Witwer's fault because he insisted it was the wrong move for him to play Zod. Why would you talk yourself out of a role? But he should have played Zod, and I'm always going to say that. And so I think Smallville would have finished dramatically differently if Alan Miles remained on the show and it remained on the WB. Because, how do I know this? Because Alan Miles, like a couple of weeks later, were at a press conference and they were asked how they would have ended the show. And they said, well, Lex and Lana would have been resentful of Clark once he left Smallville and become Superman. Those relationships wouldn't have ended in the right way. But I just feel that Tom Welling probably would have been made to wear the costume. At the very least, they would have VFX'd the costume on him. He probably would have flown over Smallville, flown over Metropolis. But Alan Miles said, and DC said, there was no contractual obligations for them. He was always allowed to put the costume on. Now, I absolutely agreed with Tom Welling through seasons 1 to 10, before the finale. It's a pre-Superman story. There's no need for him to wear the costume. Now, I thought, like in the season 9 finale, when they showed us the flash forward of Metropolis, I thought, well, maybe they're going to do flash forwards, like in the final season, of him being Superman. That would have been kind of exciting, right? Pre-Superman Clark, but flashing forward to actual Superman Clark and Justice League and all that jazz, and that would have been a fun final season. And then they amalgamate together by the series finale. That's something that probably where my imagination would have taken me to. I just think that Alan Miles would have finished Smallville in the right way. I think Alan Miles wouldn't have hobbled on for a 10th season. The only reason he went to 10 seasons is because the CW was a rating-starved network. And, when Man of Steel came into development, basically Snyder and, what's his name? David Goyer and Nolan all wanted Smallville to be cancelled when they started developing the DCEU and Man of Steel, because just like James Gunn, they didn't want any competing Superman properties. And because they felt that could damage them, because Smallville was this huge franchise, this huge thing that had been, supporting the Superman myth in live action for years. It brought new Superman fans, as I discussed and explained the other day. If anything, it's Smallville that should have had its own franchise on film coming from television. That's what should have happened. Smallville was massive. It set a template for modern day Superman and superheroes in live action, and it was never allowed to do that. Smallville, the universe, could still be around now. Tom Welling could be dressing up as Superman right now. Instead of Arrowverse, we could have had the Smallville television universe with other spin-offs. It never happened because the CW ultimately hated Smallville. But if the WB remained to be, and Alan Miles remained on the show, I think the kind of ending that we would have got would be imagine Descent when Lex kills Lionel. Imagine Arctic when Lex finally discovers the Fortress of Solitude. I think you would have an amalgamation of, in that series finale of Lex killing Lionel and him discovering the fortress and it all being very climactic. I think that would have all been part of it, if not in the finale, in the penultimate episode. I always felt without Alan Miles there was going to be a sense of betrayal, and it was. I spoke the other day about the animals taking over the zoo, and they were allowed to because there was a weak leadership there who were being dictated to by a network that hated the show, and a bunch of cast members who thought they knew best.